Next is types of demand. There are 4 types of demand, which are derived demand, competitive demand, composite demand, and complementary or joint demand. Demand is said to be derived if the demand for a commodity would lead to a demand for another commodity. An example is factor input, like labor. When labor is demanded, it's not demanded for its own particular or its benefit, but demanded to create the demand for another thing, like good roads, hospital, create the demand for cars, and so on and so forth. The next is competitive demand. Demand is said to be competitive if an increase in the price of a particular goods, which will lead to the decrease in its demand, would increase the demand for another goods. This occurs in the case of close substitute. An example is Homo detergent and clean detergent. An increase in the price of Homo will reduce the demand for it and then increase the demand for clean. The next is competitive demand. Demand is said to be competitive if an increase in the price of a commodity, which will lead to the decrease in its demand, will lead to increase in the demand of another. This occurs in the case of close substitute. An example of this can be Homo detergent and clean detergent. The increase in the price of Homo detergent will lead to decrease in its demand, then which will now lead to the increase in the demand for clean. The next is composite demand. Demand is said to be composite when a commodity is demanded for more purposes. An example is granite. The increase in the price of these goods, granite, will increase other things. The next is complementary or joint demand. When an increase in the demand of a commodity leads to an increase in the demand of another, demand is said to be complementary or joint. An example is a car and petrol. An increase in the price of car will lead to increase in the demand for petrol. This will lead us to change in demand. The next is change in demand. Change in demand is a bodily shift of demand from one position to the other, or we say upward, downward. Change in demand is usually caused by other factors other than price, majorly income of a consumer. This can be graphically represented on a table where we have the price fixed and variation or changes in the quantity demanded. The original quantity demanded here is quantity Q, quantity 2, quantity 1, and can be drawn this way. From here, we have the original quantity to be quantity Q, that is D0. If it moves outward, it shows increase in demand. And if it moves backward, it shows decrease in demand. From here, we move to changes in quantity demanded.
Action.
Change in quantity demanded. This is a movement along demand curve. Unlike change in demand, where every other factor affects it and price remains constant, in change in quantity demanded, the major factor is the price. The variation in the price would also change the quantity demanded. This can be graphically represented on a graph where we have P1, price 1, forming Q1, and price 2 when increased leads to decrease in quantity demanded, Q2. Demand curve is drawn, but it shows either an upward movement or a downward movement. This is change in quantity demanded. From where we move to abnormal demand curve. The next is abnormal demand. Abnormal demand does not follow the regular laws of demand. In fact, is the opposite instead. Abnormal demand law states that the higher the price, the higher the quantity demanded, and the lower the price, the lower the quantity demanded. Abnormal demand. Abnormal demand can also be called exceptional demand. For a normal demand curve, which moves from downward from left to right. But in the case of abnormal or exceptional demand, it moves downward from right to left, which means it does not observe the law of demand. This is caused by either further exceptional rise or decrease in price, or goods of ostentatious or given or inferior goods. The next is elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand is the degree or extent of responsiveness of demand to changes in price, income, and taste of consumers. This shows us the response of consumers in relationship to the variation in price, in their income level, and in their taste for a commodity. For the course of this study, we'll be looking at price, elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, talks about the income level of a consumer, and gross elasticity of demand.
Action.
Now, price elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand measures the degree of responsiveness of demand to variation or changes in the price. It can also be defined as a percentage change in the quantity demanded over the price. This is better explained in the types of price elasticity of demand, which are unitary elasticity, elastic, inelastic, perfectly elastic, perfectly inelastic. Now we take unitary elasticity or unitary elastic or price elasticity. Demand is said to be unitary when a percentage change in price bring about an equal percentage change in quantity. In this case, demand is said to be equal to 1, and it can be better explained on a graphical representation where you have price 1 equal to quantity, taking quantity 1, and price 2 drawn in equal percentage to quantity 2. Now you notice that the size of what we have here is equal to the size of what you have here. So when you have shape drawn this way, when you have graphs drawn this way, it means demand is unitary. The next is elastic.